folks, what's going on? Heir of Carthage here. What the crap's going on? There we go. I've combined two, very retro things here on my channel. The What the Crap intro with the Rome 2 gameplay here, right? So we are back. Back indeed. This is going to be the second game in a best of 5 for a 2v2 tournament called Spear and Shield. This one is going to be Bobi and the Duke versus Sofado and Hamilkar Barca. And the matchups here is going to be Nervii and Masazeli versus Armenia. Sorry, I just about forgot it. Armenia and Iceni. Again, I understand that those of you who are Rome 2 fans are going to be watching this. I had some hilarious comments on the last one. People were like, Heir explaining Rome 2? But, what is this? Yeah, I know. The game's been around for a long time. I do have a lot of fans that probably just came around for Warhammer, and for all the Warhammer video I make, I probably have even more people who came to this channel for Rome 2 way back in the day, so they're probably feeling way past due on all this stuff. In any case, yes, I am going to explain a little bit of Rome 2. So Nervii is a barbarian faction, kind of a Germanic-type faction, mix of, actually probably a Celtic, probably more Celtic in play the way they are. And so we have the Nervii here. They do have some interesting kind of mid-tier sword units, which is these fierce swords here. These guys are going to hit really hard on the charge with decent weapon damage, but they're going to be severely lacking on armor compared to the heavier variants. So they're a decent unit to work on the flank. You can see the heavy variants, and some people joke too. They're like, you can play Rome 2 without all heavy infantry. Rome 2 is very heavy infantry centric. I don't know if this was really the main and only fighting style back then. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't, but yeah, it is very heavy infantry-centric, and Oathsworn are some of the best here. You can see that their melee attack and weapon damage is ferocious, very solid melee defense, a very hard-hitting charge, and solid armor and morale to boot. They also have a kind of a defensive position that makes them a little better on their melee defense stat, and then a Headhunter ability, which helps them do extra damage. I think we can mouse over it. Yeah, Headhunt right here, so it increases their melee attack and morale while taking away defense. And that's where the general is going to be for the Nervii as well. Now, as for the Masazeli teammate, and sorry, I better call these out here right to Mercenary Germanic Scout Riders. These are a javelin cavalry and can be effective against other cavalry. They're very quick. They get around the battlefield. You can see it's very light missile cavalry, so that weight class there in the cavalry means they're going to be very quick, and with the javelins, they're going to be decent against other cavalry in terms of causing some damage and being able to stay out of a fight until they want to be. Now, for the Masazeli, this is a Numidian faction, so they're going to have a bit more desert-type units. You can see, in fact, they have desert legionaries here. These are actually somewhat similar to Roman legionaries, though they're probably not going to have all the leadership stats and stuff that the Roman legionaries would, but you can see several units of desert cohort and desert legionaries here. The general for this army is an armored Numidian rider. This is a shot cavalry unit. You can tell by the way they're holding these spears and stuff. In this game, this was indicative of a shot cavalry unit, and you can see that their charge bonus here is very significant, all the way up at 60. Though their weapon damage isn't huge, melee attack's not bad. They do have a bonus versus large, so shot cavalry are going to do better when getting a really good charge. These armored Numidian cavalry are a javelin cavalry. It's a heavier cavalry, so they do have a little bit more mass. They do decent in melee. They're kind of like a hybrid unit. They're a decent javelin cav that's also not bad in melee with lighter units, though they probably wouldn't want to get into melee with other, spear horse type units. That they can still be a good secondary cavalry. And you can also see some armored Numidian riders, which is going to be similar to the Jav Cav, but a little more melee-centric type of a unit. But yeah, that's kind of the Numidian army. They do have some tribal slingers here. Again, remember, slingers do less damage, but tend to have more ammunition. They also have a shield, which helps them a little bit when skirmishing with archers. And then we have some desert vigiles. These are just light spear units to guard the front of the Numidian forces. And then over here, we've got the Levy Freemen, which again are a light spear unit with javelins, very good for protecting the front lines. I'm actually going to go ahead and hit play here. We can just kind of keep the battle running. Now, as for the... actually, no, we'll keep it in slow motion just for a minute while we finish this. The Armenian player here has some hillmen in the very front. Hillmen are an axe unit that's very cheap, can cause decent damage in the right scenarios, but they can't hold up for very long. They are supporting some Eastern Slingers. Now, Eastern Slingers are pretty decent slingers, if I remember right. Not bad at all in terms of their stats. And then for the infantry line, we've got Hillmen, Persian Hoplites, which is a lighter hoplite unit. And then we have in here Cartly Axemen. These guys do a pretty high attack. Their weapon damage isn't very high, but it's a fair bit of armor piercing. So Cartly Axemen can be decent in the right fight as well. You can see that there's a couple of them mixed in with these different Persian hoplite units. Now, Armenia also can field some very heavy shock cavalry, some really cool stuff, and we have that here with these royal cataphracts, and that's where the general is. These guys have a massive charge, huge armor, and a lot of health with good morale. They will punish you on a charge. Now, very heavy infantry being charged from the front, they probably won't do a lot, but an unbraced infantry unit is going to eat it from these guys. One of the downsides, though, to these cataphract units is they get tired very quickly, especially if they're using their special abilities. So they will do a lot of damage with their special on the charge, but they can get tired very quickly and are going to need to be used properly cycling. And they're going to be supported by Noble Blood Cavalry, which is a good pick. This is a very solid anti-cavalry, melee cavalry type unit to support shock cavalry. So a cool pick to see this in with the Armenian forces. I really like Armenia. Their infantry is a bit lacking. Their skirmishing is pretty decent. And their heavy cavalry game is stellar. So they've got some really punishingly good cavalry here in these cataphracts. Really cool to see some heavy cav play. Now, for the Iceni, they're going to have a lot of Chosen Swordband and Heroic Nobles. You can see the Heroic Nobles here. This is similar to an Oathsworn unit. Probably not quite as good as an Oathsworn, but very similar. And then Chosen Swordband is going to be a slightly less attack, but still overall pretty solid sword unit. For the Iceni. It's kind of a middle of the road. It's called a very heavy unit. You can see it's got the squared off banner, but their stats aren't probably quite up to snuff with some of the noble type units. And if we look at their cavalry, we got veteran riders. Veteran riders are a heavy melee cav. They're not very heavy, but they're a pretty solid unit for the price. They're going to be good, but they won't be the best. But you can field them typically in decent numbers because of the cost being pretty good. And then I have Britain Slingers here supporting the Iceni as well, and some Levy Spears up front, along with some Chosen Spear bands. This is a heavier spear unit. Pretty cool to see them in here. Now remember, the higher tier spear units have this special ability a lot of times, this cavalry counter tactics, which gives them for a short time a bonus versus cavalry, an extra bonus versus cavalry. So they can be very effective when working against cavalry factions. So let's see how this matchup goes. All the players are arrayed, and as with most Rome 2 games, let me explain just a couple other differences for those folks who just getting back into this game or never have been into it and want to know. If you already know this, then feel free to skip ahead a little. In Rome 2, you can spread your infantry wider than you can in Warhammer. In Warhammer, you're more likely to see units moving in kind of closely, and not always, but sometimes you'll see them moving in closely more packed formations because leaders can protect them, monsters can protect them, and it keeps them closer together. There are downsides. You could get hit by a vortex or a breath spell. Obviously, none of that stuff exists in Rome 2. And I had Regina comment, she's like, how come they never deploy together in Rome 2 and they always seem to be fighting separate battles? You can deploy together in Rome 2. However, since players tend to spread wide, if you deploy together, you usually end up being surrounded. To say that you can't still win a battle that way, you can, but it gets a lot harder because you will have ceded a flank. And so you're going to see players spreading very wide and making it difficult. You can see over here, again, this is not corner camping or anything. They're just trying to keep their opponent from having an easy path from getting in behind them and causing trouble. So you'll see this more spreading type game here in Rome 2, just because that's the way that this game played out. Skirmishing takes a little longer. It's not as quickly decisive as it can be in Warhammer as well. Like if you come up and have a bunch of guns or something like that in Warhammer 2, and they unleash a devastating volley, it can pretty quickly start to shift a battle. In this game, typically, some skirmishers, sure, they can kill fast, but you're not going to usually see mass casualties inflicted with skirmishing right away, and so you'll see it's more common for players to kind of keep jockeying, pulling back and forth a little bit, and trying to get the upper hand in skirmishing, because even just having a few skirmishers alive in the late game can sometimes mean the difference between victory and death. You'll also see a little bit of this stuff sometimes where it's the light infantry play trying to push the enemy skirmishers, and then sometimes cavalry making feint charges or sometimes real charges in these same scenarios. These light infantry can get messed up real quick by a heavy cavalry if they're not braced, but the heavy cavalry can get jacked up by the light infantry if it has javelins very quickly as well. So it's definitely a lot more cat and mouse than it may look like for someone who's relatively new to the game. Over here you can see the Celtic slingers are actually getting shellacked pretty hard by the Briton slingers here, and so this is not great for the Nervii in terms of the opening engagement. The Celtic slingers, you can see here, have 23 damage to the only 20, so this is basically, I think there's like 2, maybe 3 weapon damages in the game for slingers, and the Briton slingers are pretty good there at 23, whereas the you can see the Celtic slingers not quite so much, so the Briton slinger's good. You can see the tribal slingers over here at 20, and then the Eastern slingers again at 23. So again, that's some of the difference between these units. Very, very minor differences, but it's a big deal. These units with a 23 damage, later in the game, they can cause a lot of damage against heavy infantry. Yes, against cavalry, though I do think archers tend to be a little more effective against cavalry, but slingers really eat up that armor late in the game, and their higher ammunition count kind of helps with that as well. See the Eastern slingers trading with the tribal slingers over here and try and get a feel for how it's going. You see some of the tribal slingers pulled back, maybe hoping to come back into the fight. These Eastern slingers are getting a little overwhelmed. They're 2-to-1, and although they're better, they're not going to win 2-to-1 to the tribal slingers. So again, you're going to see a lot of this type of thing in Rome 2. A little bit more patient opening game here, because you really need to establish some range supremacy in order to maybe try and force the other person into a less favorable infantry engagement, because once the infantry engagement starts, if it doesn't go the way you need it to, sometimes it's irreversible. You know, it might just be a slow downhill where you're just going to watch your troops lose because you may not have the superior infantry. And in this case, if I just had to take a look at the infantry and take a guess, you got 4 Oathsworn over here. That's going to be a tough nut to crack here for these Iceni. Not impossible, but I mean, that is a tough bunch of infantry. The Desert Legionaries ought to match up fairly well against their Armenian opponents here. But again, Desert Legionaries are not Roman Legionaries, so they're not quite up to that same tier, but I mean, they're decent units. You can see that they're in that very heavy weight class, and they've got good shields and the like. I like these hillmen kind of doing a bit of screening for these units as well. You can see that the slingers have kind of pulled back for a moment, maybe just hoping to kind of survive a while and maybe see if the hillmen or other units can draw a little bit of fire. And you can see the Iceni pushing here more, the Nervii falling back, and having to continue to try and get a skirmishing advantage. They've still got a lot of skirmishers left here, 3 units of slingers, and they're trying to get back at these Briton slingers, which appeared to be gaining an edge, and they are doing pretty good. These Briton slingers haven't taken near the damage. Look at this. The unbraced Levy Freeman just gets shellacked by the veteran riders, and they're going to then bring in their own Levy Freeman and pull the veteran riders out. This is what I was talking about with the cavalry charge. That's 51 kills. So that's a very nice charge here by the Iceni player. And then followed up with infantry to prevent his cavalry from being chased and hit by Spear Brothers and Levy Freeman, both of which are just kind of light spear units now. Look at this right here. Ooh, yeah, this is a dangerous situation for the Nervii. This Fierce Sword will get trounced by the veteran rider, so you can see the support moving in, so nice play by the Nervii here to save their Fierce Swords and not let that happen. The Iceni are getting a pretty solid engagement here. These heroic nobles, and there was more than one heroic noble, yeah, so it looked like all chosen sword bambi. Never mind, there's another heroic noble here. The heroic noble is not quite as good as an Oathsworn, if I remember right, but it's pretty close. So, you know, a couple factors there. Look at this, they got a charge, they're going to cycle back in here because now there's some Oathsworn. You can see the Oathsworn are saying, nope, not giving them that freebie. So again, a lot of cat and mouse that you're going to see taking place, and instead the Oathsworn want to get a free charge on this chosen sword band. And that's actually going to be a pretty good call by the Nervii, and you can see here the Fierce Swords do indeed get charged by the veteran riders, and they get leveled. So the Fierce Swords took a pretty big hit, but the Mighty Horse, which is a similar cavalry to the veteran riders, is going to get a counter charge, and this cavalry wasn't able to pull out supremely quick. They are going to get backed up by the Chosen Spear Band now, who you can see pop this cavalry counter tactics, and that's going to force the Nervii back, or they're going to take heavy casualties. And without getting a charge, the Fierce Swords aren't going to love fighting the Chosen Spear Band, but they'll do okay. And so we can see the matchup unfolding here, the lighter spear units clashing and kind of creating the bit of cat and mouse play against the heavier infantry. Here comes some Royal Cataphracts looking for a charge. Let's watch that. Yeah, none of this infantry was braced. The Desert Vigiles did manage to block for the Legionaries just a little bit, though. But look at this Cataphract, Eastern Cataphract, already 50 kills. So that's how shot cavalry works in this game, and that's a pretty good demonstration of how to use it to affect an infantry fight here. If you can get all the way around the flank, you can do hammer and anvil type charges. But obviously here, they're not making the flank easy to gain. With all these javelin horsemen roaming, shot cavalry gets shredded by javelin horses. It's actually a very good counter to keeping shot cavalry from being able to move freely about the battlefield. Nervii looking like they're in a bit of trouble here. I see a lot of fights like they're outnumbered 3-1 here. The veteran riders are definitely getting beat up, but keeping the Germanic riders out. So I don't know how this fight's going to turn out for the Nervii, but there's a couple of concerning engagements here in my mind. These Chosen Sword Band ought to do decently against the Fierce Swords, and the Cataphracts continue to get some pretty effective charges here. That is over 100 kills already, soaring over 100 kills for the Eastern Cataphracts, so very nicely played by the Armenian player, and there's some mercenary Cappadocian cavalry and noble blood cavalry on the field as well. So I mean, this is a dangerous cavalry force here for the Masazeli player, or Massilia, or I think it's Masazeli. I think it's Masazeli, yeah. 122 kills on these Eastern Cataphracts. Let's check out some of the others. Royal Cataphracts have not engaged yet. Probably a good idea to save the general if you can. Looks like a little bit of action on some of these other horsemen, but not much yet. It's mostly been this Eastern Cataphract unit, and holy crap, are they owning. They are owning. Look, there's more veteran riders back here. Let's take a look at this infantry engagement. It does indeed look a little bit bleak for the Nervii here. I don't know, though. These Oathsworn are very tough, but I don't think they can overcome all this. Look, there's another heroic noble out here untouched. There's already spearmen in the back, so to me, this is looking like a bad situation for the Nervii, even if their infantry is somewhat superior here with the Oathsworn. You can see it is good. The Oathsworn is chopping up a lot of enemy infantry here. Look at this nice veteran rider charge. This blunts the charge of the Oathsworn and allows the Chosen Sword Band to get in without being countercharged. So that was a very nice play there, too, by the Iceni. Let's take a look at this Armenia Masazeli fight over here, too. I like both of these factions, so I'm excited to see this. The Numidian factions are a lot of fun. Armenia is a really cool faction. Check out these square formation here. Nicely done at the last second there by the Desert Vigiles, and a good way to kind of bog down some of this Cataphracts, maybe not get them as many kills, and then you can see behind them the tribal slingers and the armored Numidian cavalry hurling their javelins in here, so the Cataphracts will want to get out of there as quickly as possible. You can see some horse skirmishers here, a similar light javelin cavalry, but this 41 damage javelin, that's the dangerous one. This is the one that does a tremendous amount of damage. So if you see the horse skirmishers with the 41 damage, that's some pretty serious business. The Numidian cavalry should have that similar javelin. It will do damage very quickly to unshielded cavalry, even shielded given time. Look at this. I told you all about the weakness of Cataphracts. This unit did so much work. It got tired, it gets less combat effective, and now, look, they've got a mercenary Germanic scout rider harassing them, and it's not going to be good. Even with all that armor, these Cataphracts can't take a lot of javelin volleys from that type of stuff. It is not good for them. Look at this, the Nervii. I was worried, and now, like, all of a sudden, I see quite a few Iceni units missing. The Nervii putting up a really nice fight. Oh, the Royal Cataphracts coming into play here. Oof. Yeah, smashing into the back of these Oathsworn, who are also engaged by heroic nobles. This is a classic hammer and anvil charge here, and it is going to do some damage. You can see the the Oathsworn trying to chase off the Royal Cataphracts. The Cataphracts definitely don't want to stay in combat for a long period of time. Get that charge, get out, and look for your next charge. So shot cavalry is somewhat micro-intensive. Take a look here. Masazeli, actually, although they took some brutal damage early on, Masazeli's infantry survived and won the fight, which is not crazy surprising because Armenian infantry is probably subpar compared to most. And these Desert Legionaries and other units survived that fight. And you can see them here, 63 kills, 131 kills. I mean, they did very nicely in that fight, even better than I thought they would. But again, I'm a little bit far removed from this game. This is a best of 5 matchup, so we'll kind of see what happens here. The submitting team, the one with the blue and yellow outlines on their banners, won game 1. I actually don't know who wins this one. I haven't watched it yet. I was actually thinking this was looking pretty solid for Iceni and for Armenia. Now I'm not convinced because there's a lot of heavy infantry left here for Masazeli. There's really none left for the Nervii. Yeah, I mean, this heavy infantry can resist stuff like Cataphract charges. Let's take a look at skirmishers. We got tribal slingers left here. There is 1 Briton slinger here, no 2. 2 Briton slingers, a horse skirmishers. Let's take a look at the cataphract situation. An Eastern cataphract in very good health. A royal cataphract in, 3/4 health. A noble blood cavalry at about 3/4. And a mercenary Cappadocian cav at just over 50%. A couple of veteran riders. There is some serious cavalry power here. Though the infantry power left, I mean, these Chosen Swordsband ought to match up nicely with Desert Legionaries. There's just not a ton of them left, the Heroic Nobles. And Swordband, like I said, ought to be a good matchup for the Desert Legionaries. And I love this, like there was a big fight. Some people said, well, how come they don't deploy together? Well, that original fight, like I said, they were trying to spread out. And now, at this stage of the fight, this is going to be where it turns into they're deploying together to try and provide what protection they can so that each player doesn't get singled out now. There's not enough units to spread the battlefield. What do we got here? 2 Briton slingers and an Eastern slinger. I would think that the skirmishing advantage sits squarely on the Iceni and Armenian alliance here, though. Slightly outnumbered, maybe, but the damage component and health of the units looks pretty solid over here. As far as cavalry controls, there's a fair number of horse skirmishers. These armored Numidian cavalry, and I don't know how many javelins they have left, though. That is a tough thing to answer. If they have a lot of javelins left, that could spell doom for this heavy cavalry back here, especially the shock cavalry that doesn't have a shield. We're going to see some horse skirmishers coming out here to screen the scout cavalry, so there must be some javelins left or some fear of those javelins being left. Here comes the skirmishing. See the slingers firing away. At this point, I'm curious to see whether slingers... over here is slinger on slinger. I can't tell what's happening here. It looks like the Spear Brothers are being targeted here in the middle. I don't know if that's just a fire at will, if it's intentional. This unit doesn't appear to be firing. Maybe just outside of range. And look at this, are the slingers here out of ammunition? No, they still got their slings out. They're just picking a different target. Oh, they're going for the Desert Legionaries. They're bypassing the enemy skirmishers and chipping away at the heavy infantry. It's an interesting pick. Look at this. Duking it out here. Horse skirmishers and Germanic scout riders. A little bit of cat and mouse here. They may be trying to bait javelins out of each other and dodge the javelins. I mean, that's a thing I've seen before. I don't know if that's what's happening there, but it very well could be. Seeing if they can bait some javelins. Again, javelins in late game can spell the difference between stopping a heavy cavalry unit and having that heavy cavalry unit stomp you. So it's kind of interesting to see a lot of this cat and mouse play. This is a very drawn-out battle here. Very drawn-out battle, which is cool. It's had a lot of phases. Let's kind of check the skirmishing. It looks like the Nervii Masazeli team here is feeling compelled to engage. They're at least pushing up. Let's see if there's a dagger in the hands. Yeah, there's a dagger in the hands of these slingers, which means that they could be out of ammunition. And if they're out of ammunition, it's possible that the Briton slingers are going to be out of ammunition soon, too. I don't see daggers out, though. These guys have daggers out, so they're probably out of ammo. Which means both sides are probably very low on ammo. Oof, these cataphracts. Yeah, you can see now the armored Numidian riders and the yeah, all of them moving up to try and counter. Here comes the heavy cavalry of Armenia trying to assert its dominance. Desert Vigile is getting the last second ability use. Oh boy, the armored riders did hit the heroic noble, but I don't think it's going to do a ton. Oh, never mind. There's some kills dropping there. There are some kills dropping. Let's see. The Cataphract cycled in and out. 62 kills on that Eastern Cataphract. The Royal Cataphract just picked up some more by charging in here to the Chosen Swordband. It needs to get out of this fight, though. It definitely needs to get out of the fight. It's going to be getting chopped up a little if it doesn't move. So let's see how this engagement goes. The Heroic Nobles now faced up against Desert Legionaries and had the help of the Royal Cataphracts. Yeah, there's a veteran rider that was looking for a bit of a rear charge here, and it's going to be chased off by the armored Numidian cavalry. I would think they're going to have to turn and fight here, though. Maybe they just wanted the extra units around. Yeah, it did turn and fight eventually. I would think the veteran rider would do decent against the armored Numidian cavalry. You're going to see this here, the mercenary Cappadocian Cav, easily able to beat these guys in melee, but the Germanic scout riders much faster. Oof. Yeah, the infantry line from Masazeli is crumbling. Well, it crumbled in a couple spots. It's definitely crumbled over here, and it's not looking good in some places. These legionaries are down on their morale. Yeah, as expected, I'm not really shocked here that the heavy infantry is struggling against the heavy infantry. The heavy infantry of Numidia is struggling against that of the Iceni. Barbarian infantry is very stable, very solid infantry. Yeah, actually, it's starting to look to me again like that the Iceni and Armenia may have the edge here. The balance bar, though, is still pretty close. Just try and get the best inventory of stuff I can here. You've got the armored Numidian riders duking it out over here with the Eastern Cataphracts and Royal Cataphracts. And there's heavy infantry here. That's not going to bode well for Numidia. There is a little bit of desert cohort here left fighting the heroic nobles. Some mercenary Germanic cavalry making its way around. This is going to be a pretty close fight, I think, folks. Look at this. The desert cohort here is going to overpower the chosen spear band. The armored Numidian cavalry here holding on very well. The mercenary Cappadocian cavalry being left while the Eastern Cataphracts pull back. Wow, 193 kills and a chevron and a half, basically. So that Eastern Cataphract got some work done. 169 kills on the other one. Oof. Yeah, that's some tough units. Oh, actually now the power bar's swinging back the other way. So every time I make a prediction, it seems like it swings back the other way. Now it's somewhat favoring the Nervii and Masazeli. There's definitely been some swings here. This mercenary Cappadocian cavalry is getting a good hit here on the Germanic scout riders, but the Briton slingers aren't going to last much longer. This heroic noble is getting beaten up by an armored Numidian rider, but now has some protection from these cataphracts. You can see the armored Numidian cavalry didn't want any part of that charge. They did not want that charge. I doubt they have javelins left. Look at this, though. A Celtic slinger back here has a little bit of ammo firing at the cataphracts. So that's a big deal. It's actually a really big deal. Look, the power bar right back down in the center now all of a sudden. Ooh, let's see if this cataphract levels the slinger unit. No. It's going to ignore the slinger unit and go for the armored Numidian riders. There's already an Eastern cataphract engaged with them. Now remember, the cataphracts in this game, not like the Game 1 cataphracts. In Game 1 of Rome 1, instead of Game 2, that there was an alternative attack for cataphracts. It was an armor-piercing mace that made the cataphracts both very good on the charge and very good in prolonged melee. Oh my goodness, I think, yeah, Masazeli and Nervii are going to pull this one back and win it. That is really cool. This battle flipped so many times in my mind, and I could have sworn there was a couple times where I really felt like the Armenians... That was awesome to watch. I felt like a couple times the Armenians and their allies had that one. And sure enough, the Masazeli and the Nervii just barely alive in this fight to the end with the mercenary scout riders. They managed to pull it back. What a Pyrrhic victory. It says costly victory. This is definitely a Pyrrhic victory here. Yeah, there it calls it out that way. So what a game, man, between Bobi the Duke and the Sofado and Hamilkar. Now remember, this is a best of 5 series, and Bobi and the Duke are up 2-0 right now. So the next game could potentially determine the series. We're going to have to wait and see. This was a really fun one. Hope you all enjoyed this one too. Look at the work, man. Some decent kills here. This Oathsworn not so much, but these two definitely getting some work done. Nice support by the Fierce Swords. I love Germanic Scout Riders. These are an excellent cavalry in the game. Celtic Slingers are cheap. Maybe not the best, but for the cost, they usually provide a pretty good trade. And Masazeli here, a really cool army too to see the Numidians at work with their heavy infantry. Not always quite up to snuff as some of the other factions, but look, they did it here, folks. They tanked it out. They managed to get it done. Look at this desert cohort here too, man. What a bunch of beasts getting the job done. Tribal Slingers hanging in there as well. And then for Sofado, I love this Iceni build. The Iceni are such a cool faction. These Chosen Swordsmen, man, these two guys cleaned house. This Heroic Noble did fantastic, as did the other. So a very good play there. Britain Slingers, pretty effective slingers. And then Armenia is a faction that I also really like because of the heavy cavalry. And holy crap, did the heavy cavalry not really disappoint. Look at this. These 3 cataphract units racking up 600 kills for his army. I mean, maybe one shy of 600 kills. And the Noble Blood Cavalry very well. The Cappadocian Cav didn't pick up as many kills, but it has a chevron, so I'm curious whether that was there before or whether it got him in game. So very nicely played. I mean, it's very difficult to work with Armenian infantry. They are not great, and that's one of the things that makes Armenian play a little bit more difficult, but a fun game with slightly different types of factions here. Very cool one. Enjoyed this. Can't wait to see the next game, and we'll see what happens there. Anyway, HeirofCarthage signing out from the lands near Carthage and Rome 2 even. I'll see you all next time.